I never thought I'd find myself in the kind of situation that plays out in movies or those late-night talk shows where someone's spouse cheats on them. My wife Jessica and I had been together for nearly a decade, and on the surface, everything seemed perfect. We had a nice house, a couple of dogs, and our friends often joked about how we were the power couple. But as with most things that seem perfect, there was a crack underneath that I just couldn't see. At first, it was the little things. Jessica started coming home late from work more frequently, claiming that her boss was piling on extra projects. I didn't think much of it at the time. After all, I'd been working longer hours myself, and I figured she was just under pressure. But then I noticed her phone lighting up constantly at odd hours, and she'd quickly turn it face down whenever I walked into the room. Small signs that I dismissed because I wanted to believe in us. One evening I came home early, planning to surprise her with dinner. I was excited, imagining her reaction and the chance to reconnect. When I walked into the house, though, something felt off. Jessica's car was in the driveway, but she wasn't home. I assumed she was out picking up something for dinner, but an hour passed, then two. By the time she finally walked in, her hair was tousled and her clothes seemed off. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Later that week, I noticed changes in her behavior. She was more distant, often lost in thought. When I asked her about it, she brushed me off with a curt, "I'm fine." I wanted to believe her, but deep down I could feel the distance growing between us. It was like standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing you might fall but being too afraid to take that step back. The breaking point came on a Friday night. I had decided to do some digging just to ease my own mind. I went through her texts, something I never thought I'd do, but here we were. That's when I saw the name, Mark. My heart sank. Mark was not just a colleague, he was my ex's husband. I felt sick to my stomach. I clicked on the conversation and read the messages. It was as if I'd been punched in the gut, flirty messages, suggestive emojis, and plans for late-night meetups. My world shattered in an instant. I confronted her that night. I remember the look on her face, a mix of surprise and guilt. She tried to deny it at first, claiming they were just friends, that I was reading too much into it. But I couldn't let her manipulate me any longer. I told her I had seen the messages, and her facade crumbled. She admitted to the affair, her voice shaking as she told me it meant nothing, that she was just looking for excitement. At that moment, I felt a rush of emotions, anger, betrayal, sadness. But most of all, I felt a sense of clarity. I'd been living in a lie, and she had the audacity to downplay our relationship as if it was nothing. I told her to pack her bags and leave. There was no point in prolonging the agony. I wanted nothing more than to scream, to throw things, but I held it all in. I knew that I had to stick to my decision. The next few days were a blur. I went through a whirlwind of emotions, from rage to despair to strange acceptance. I felt like I was in a fog, unsure of what to do next. Should I fight for our marriage, or was it time to finally let go? I found myself replaying every moment we had shared, wondering where things had gone wrong. I thought about the love we once had, the laughter, the plans for the future, and how quickly it all disintegrated. In the midst of this turmoil, I realized something vital. I needed to put myself first. I had devoted so much of my life to making her happy that I had lost sight of my own needs. I needed to reclaim my life and my happiness, even if it meant facing the painful reality of moving on without her. So, I made a decision. I would focus on myself, my healing, and ultimately my freedom. Jessica had made her choice, and now it was time for me to make mine. I learned that love should never be one-sided, and I would no longer allow anyone to treat me as an option instead of a priority. The journey ahead was uncertain, but I was ready to face it head-on. I had learned a painful lesson about trust, and I was determined to emerge on the other side, stronger and more resilient than ever. I felt like I was ready to move forward, but I knew there was more to this story. As I began to put the pieces of my life back together, the reality of what had happened with Jessica settled in like a weight on my chest. I felt betrayed not just by her actions, but by the years I had invested in our relationship. The anger was still there, but it was mingling with a deep, gnawing sadness. I had spent so much time trusting her, building a life with her, and to see it all come crashing down was nothing short of devastating. I decided it was time to confront the situation head-on, not just with Jessica but also with my friends. I felt the need to talk to someone who could help me process everything. That weekend, I gathered a few close buddies, Tom, Mike, and Jason, for a drink at our usual spot. I figured a few beers would help ease the pain and maybe even bring some clarity to my tumultuous emotions. As we sat around the table, I shared what had happened and I could see the shock on their faces. Tom, who had always been the level-headed one, leaned back in his chair and shook his head. "Dude, I can't believe she would do that to you. What a total piece of work." "I thought I knew her," I replied, feeling the weight of my own words. "I thought we had a good marriage, but this is a whole different level of betrayal." Mike, ever the romantic, tried to offer some silver lining. "At least you found out now, man. You don't want to waste more time on someone who clearly doesn't respect you." I appreciated their support, but as the night wore on, I felt a simmering rage building within me. It wasn't just about Jessica. It was about Mark, too, the husband of my ex of all people. I had spent years trying to move on from my past, and now it felt like it was coming back to haunt me in the most twisted way possible. "I swear I'm going to make them both pay," I found myself saying, surprising even myself with the conviction in my voice. I wasn't really sure what that meant, but I could feel a fire igniting inside of me. After that night, I began to think more about what revenge might look like. The idea of it gave me a strange sense of empowerment. I wasn't going to let them walk away unscathed. Jessica had taken away my trust, my peace of mind, and I needed to reclaim that in any way I could. I started by gathering information. With the help of Tom, who had a knack for tech, I began to dig deeper into Jessica and Mark's correspondence. I learned about their secret rendezvous and discovered they had been meeting at apartment complexes around town. That wasn't just an affair. It was a full-fledged relationship masquerading as a fling. Every detail I uncovered fueled my desire for revenge. I imagined the look on Jessica's face when she realized that I knew everything. I thought about how it would feel to confront Mark, to stare him down and remind him of his own failure. The more I plotted, the more I felt I was taking back control of my life. But as the days turned into weeks, I began to realize that dwelling on revenge was only serving to keep me anchored in pain. I had to balance my anger with the need to move forward. I couldn't let their betrayal consume me. I needed to find a way to rise above it. That's when I decided to channel my feelings into something productive. I signed up for a local gym, something I had talked about doing for years but had always put off. I wanted to feel strong again, both physically and mentally. I started working out regularly, focusing on my health and well-being. It was a cathartic way to release all that pent-up rage I had toward Jessica and Mark. With each drop of sweat, I felt a little more like myself again. As I immersed myself in this new routine, I also leaned on my friends more. They were my support system, helping me navigate the emotional roller coaster that followed the discovery of Jessica's infidelity. We spent time playing video games, going hiking, and just hanging out. I started to remember what it felt like to just be me, not Jessica's husband, but simply Michael. Still, in the back of my mind, the plan for revenge simmered, each day growing more elaborate. I envisioned how I would present the evidence to both Jessica and Mark simultaneously, creating a moment of chaos that would highlight their betrayal. It would be poetic, a final act of closure that would leave them both reeling. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that revenge might not be the best course of action. Sure, it felt good to fantasize about it, but deep down, I knew the only real revenge that mattered was moving on and living my life as freely and joyfully as I could. I didn't want to be defined by this betrayal. I wanted to emerge from it stronger. Even so, the temptation to execute my plan lingered. The idea of unveiling their secrets still held a certain appeal, a final act of defiance against the life I once had. I wrestled with these thoughts, torn between my need for closure and my growing desire to simply let go. With each passing day, I was aware that I was transforming. The betrayal had rocked my world, but I was learning to rebuild it on my own terms. I knew that whatever I decided to do next would be pivotal, not just for my relationship with Jessica, but for my own journey toward healing. I wanted to be sure that the next steps I took would lead me toward liberation rather than further entrapment in a cycle of hurt and revenge. In this whirlwind of emotions, the only thing that was clear to me was that I was ready to take the next step into my new life. After several weeks of grappling with my emotions and immersing myself in self-improvement, I finally decided it was time to confront Jessica and Mark. The thought of executing my plan had morphed from a vengeful fantasy into a necessary step for my own healing. I needed closure, and I wanted them to understand the consequences of their actions. I wasn't going to let their betrayal slide without making my voice heard. I planned a rendezvous for the three of us, knowing that it would be explosive. I decided to invite them to a local bar, one that we'd all frequented together in happier times. The irony of it didn't escape me. I could still picture the nights we had laughed in, shared drinks, blissfully unaware of how things would turn out. But now that bar would serve as the stage for my confrontation. On the day of the meetup, I felt a mix of nerves and anticipation. I arrived early to scope out the place, choosing a booth in the corner where I could see both of them as they entered. I wanted to ensure I had the upper hand. I wore a tailored shirt that made me feel confident. I was ready to face the people who had betrayed me. When Jessica walked in, her demeanor was carefree. She wore that same bitchy smile that had charmed me in the beginning, but when she spotted me, the smile faded slightly, replaced with uncertainty. Mark followed closely behind her, looking equally relaxed, completely unaware of the storm that was about to unfold. "Hey, you're early," Jessica exclaimed, her voice too bright, trying to mask what I knew was an underlying tension. "Yeah, just wanted to grab a drink before we talked," I replied coolly, gesturing for them to sit. We exchanged small talk for a few minutes, but the tension in the air was palpable. I could see Jessica checking her phone nervously, and it only added to my resolve. I wasn't going to let this go on any longer. "Listen," I said, cutting through the pleasantries. "I think we need to talk about what's been going on." Jessica's expression shifted. "What do you mean?" Her voice was defensive, and I could sense her walls going up. "I mean the messages I found," I said, leaning in slightly. "The late-night meetups, the affair with Mark. You can drop the act, Jess. I know about everything." Her eyes widened, and for a moment she looked genuinely shocked. You can't be serious," she stammered, looking at Mark for support. But instead of backing her up, Mark's face turned pale and he avoided eye contact. "Oh, I'm dead serious," I continued, my heart racing. "You think I'd just let this slide? You've made a fool out of me, and I'm not going to accept your half-hearted excuses anymore." Jessica opened her mouth to speak, but I cut her off. "You both need to know how much this hurts. You turned my life into a joke, and I won't let you pretend it did. Happen, I have the messages right here." I pulled my phone out of my pocket, ready to show them the evidence of their betrayal. Mark finally spoke up. "Mike, this isn't what you think. I didn't mean for it to go this far." His voice was shaky, and I could see the guilt etched on his face. "Not what I think. You're sleeping with my wife and pretending like it's nothing. This is exactly what I think." I shot back, anger boiling inside me. Jessica tried to regain control of the conversation. "Mike, please. We were just having some fun. It didn't mean anything." Her words dripped with insincerity, and I could hardly believe she had the audacity to say that. "Fun? You think betraying someone's trust is fun?" I replied, incredulous. "You both have disrespected everything we built." "You're right. It didn't mean anything to you, but it meant everything to me." The atmosphere was heavy with tension. I could see Jessica's composure crumbling as reality set in. Mark shifted uncomfortably in his seat, clearly regretting his decisions. I could feel a sense of satisfaction as I laid my truth bare before them, but it was tinged with bitterness. I was fighting for my dignity, but this fight was also tearing me apart inside. "Look, I'm not here to save our marriage," I continued, my voice steadier than I felt. "I just want you both to understand the consequences of your actions. You think I'll let this go? I won't. I deserve better than to be treated like this. You've shown me who you really are, and I don't want any part of it anymore." Jessica, desperate to salvage something, tried to reach out. "Mike, please, we can work through this. I love you. I made a mistake." Her voice trembled, and I could see tears welling up in her eyes. "I don't want to hear it," I said firmly, shaking my head. "You lost that privilege the moment you decided to betray me. Love doesn't hurt the one it claims to cherish." In that moment, I realized that I felt more empowered than I had in weeks. I had taken a stand for myself, and there was a certain freedom in voicing my truth. I could finally see a future beyond the heartbreak, a future where I was not chained to someone who didn't appreciate or respect me. As I stood to leave, I glanced back at them. Jessica looked defeated, and Mark seemed to be wallowing in guilt. It was a bittersweet victory. I had confronted them, but the pain of their betrayal still stung. I exited the bar, taking a deep breath of fresh air, feeling as if I had shed a massive weight from my shoulders. I didn't know what the future held, and I still had to grapple with the emotional aftermath of this confrontation. But for the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. I was on my way to reclaiming my life and finding my own path, no matter how difficult it might be. The revenge I had initially sought transformed into a journey of self-discovery. It wasn't about bringing them down, it was about lifting myself up. And that was a victory in itself. In the days following the confrontation, I felt a strange mix of relief and devastation. I had faced Jessica and Mark, and I had voiced my truth. But the emotional aftermath was still very much present. The reality of the situation weighed heavily on me, but I felt a sense of liberation in knowing I had stood up for myself. It was a bittersweet victory. I had reclaimed my dignity, but the pain of betrayal lingered like a shadow. It took time for me to come to terms with everything. My friends rallied around me, offering support and distraction. Tom, in particular, suggested that I take a short trip to clear my head. "Get away for a bit, man," he said. "You need to breathe. Let's go to the cabin in the woods. It'll be good for you." Initially, I hesitated. The thought of leaving felt daunting while my life was in such disarray. But I realized that I needed to step away from the chaos, if only for a little while. So, I agreed. We packed the car with supplies and hit the road that weekend, leaving the city and all its reminders behind. The cabin was nestled in a quiet part of the woods, surrounded by tall trees and the sounds of nature. It was a welcome escape from the turmoil I had been facing. As soon as we arrived, I felt the tension in my shoulders begin to ease. The air was crisp and the atmosphere was calm. It was exactly what I needed. We spent our days hiking, fishing, and just enjoying the peace. There was something therapeutic about being surrounded by nature, away from the noise of my everyday life. I had time to reflect on everything that had happened. I realized how important it was to allow myself to feel the pain but also to begin healing. One evening, while sitting on the porch with a drink in hand, I opened up to Tom about my feelings. "I thought I knew her, you know. How could she do this? I really believed we had something special, something real," I said, staring out into the darkening woods. Tom looked at me thoughtfully. "You can't control how people act, Mike. You can only control how you respond to it. It's not a reflection of you, but of her choices. You deserve someone who appreciates the person you are." His words resonated with me. I had spent too long questioning my worth because of Jessica's betrayal. I needed to shift my focus from what she did to who I was and who I could become. I made a silent promise to myself that I wouldn't let this define me. I would emerge from this stronger and more self-aware than before. As the days passed, I engaged in various activities that helped me reconnect with myself. I spent hours in a journal, pouring my thoughts onto the page. I wrote about my feelings of hurt, anger, and ultimately, my desire for a brighter future. I also took time to explore my interests, picking up hiking trails that challenged me both physically and mentally. One morning, I decided to venture out alone. I set off on a trail that led up to a viewpoint overlooking a lake. The air was fresh, and the sun filtered through the trees, creating beautiful patterns on the ground. As I climbed, I felt a sense of catharsis with each step. I was leaving behind the heaviness of the past and embracing the promise of a new beginning. When I reached the summit, I was greeted by a breathtaking view. The lake shimmered in the sunlight, surrounded by rolling hills and the vastness of the sky. It struck me how small my worries felt in comparison to the beauty of the world around me. I took a deep breath and closed my eyes, letting the serenity wash over me. In that moment, I realized I was ready to let go of the anger I had been holding onto. I didn't want to be consumed by revenge anymore. Instead, I wanted to focus on building a future that was mine, free from the shadow of Jessica and Mark. I could choose to rise above the hurt and make something meaningful out of this experience. When I returned to the cabin, I felt lighter, more at peace. Tom noticed the change in my demeanor. "You look different," he said, a hint of curiosity in his voice. "What happened out there?" "I think I finally realized that I can let go," I replied, smiling for the first time in weeks. "I don't want to be defined by this betrayal. I want to take this as a lesson and move forward. I'm done with the anger." "That's great to hear, man. You're going to be okay," he said, clapping me on the back. The trip came to an end, but I returned home with renewed clarity. I had a long way to go, but I felt equipped to face whatever challenges lay ahead. I decided to focus on rediscovering my passions and reestablishing my life without Jessica. One evening after returning, I reached out to a few friends and invited them over for a small get-together. I wanted to surround myself with people who genuinely cared and who could help me build a new social circle. I realized that I needed to reforge connections and allow myself to be vulnerable with others. As my friends arrived, I felt a sense of warmth and support. We laughed, shared stories, and reminisced about good times. For the first time since the confrontation, I felt a glimmer of happiness that was not overshadowed by betrayal. I was determined to keep moving forward, to find joy in the present rather than dwell in the past. The night ended with a little more than just laughter. It was a reaffirmation that I was ready to step into this new chapter of my life. I would not let Jessica's choices dictate my happiness or my future. Instead, I would embrace the uncertainty of what lay ahead and trust that it would lead me somewhere better. In the weeks that followed, I focused on myself, taking classes that sparked my interest in engaging with new people. I could feel the old wounds healing, slowly transforming into lessons learned. I was no longer the wounded husband, but a man reclaiming his life, ready to take on new challenges and experiences. Part of me still struggled with the idea of confronting Jessica again, but I knew that would come in time. For now, I was on the path to healing, and that was enough. The resentment was fading, and I felt more motivated than ever to become the person I had always wanted to be. I was ready to let go of the past and embrace the future, one step at a time. As I continued to build my new life, I realized that the journey wasn't just about moving on from Jessica and Mark. It was about rediscovering who I was without them. I was no longer defined by my relationship. I was redefining my own identity. I spent time nurturing my hobbies, rekindling friendships, and even making new ones. One day, while scrolling through social media, I stumbled upon an old college friend, Sarah, who had recently moved back to town. We hadn't spoken in years, but I decided to reach out. We exchanged messages, and it quickly became clear that we had both changed quite a bit since our college days. She was vibrant, funny, and offered a fresh perspective on life. After chatting for a few days, we made plans to meet up for coffee. I was nervous but excited. The prospect of connecting with someone new felt invigorating. When we sat down at a local cafe, it felt like we picked up right where we left off, sharing laughs and stories about our college experiences. Sarah was genuinely interested in hearing about what I had been through. As I opened up about my recent struggles, she listened without judgment and offered her support. "You deserve happiness, Mike. It's great to see you taking care of yourself," she said, her eyes kind and encouraging. As we continued to meet regularly, I found myself drawn to her warmth and authenticity. We started spending more time together, exploring the city and simply enjoying each other's company. For the first time in months, I felt a spark of attraction that I hadn't anticipated. It was exhilarating and terrifying all at once. Despite the exhilaration, I struggled with the idea of moving on. I felt guilty for even considering the possibility of dating again after everything that had happened with Jessica, but I reminded myself that I deserved happiness. I had spent too long in a toxic relationship, and I was ready to embrace something positive. Eventually, I found the courage to ask Sarah out on a proper date. "How about dinner this Saturday?" I proposed, my heart racing. "I'd love that," she replied with a bright smile, and I felt a rush of relief mixed with excitement. As our date approached, I couldn't help but reflect on how much I had changed. I was stepping into this new chapter with openness and hope. On the night of our date, I dressed carefully, wanting to make a good impression. When I picked her up, I was struck by how effortless our connection felt. Dinner turned into an evening filled with laughter and engaging conversations. We shared stories about our dreams, challenges, and everything in between. I felt a genuine connection with her, one that was refreshing and free of the baggage I had carried for so long. Throughout the night, I realized that I was no longer haunted by my past. I was enjoying the present moment and allowing myself to be vulnerable again. As we walked back to her car, I felt a sense of hope that I hadn't experienced in a long time. Over the following weeks, our relationship blossomed. We went on more dates, explored the city together, and found joy in the simple moments. I was learning to let go of my fears and embrace the possibilities that lay ahead. Every interaction with Sarah reminded me that there were people out there who valued me for who I was, without any pretense. She encouraged me to pursue my passions and to be unapologetically myself. It felt liberating to be with someone who celebrated my individuality. But even as I found happiness with Sarah, the shadow of my past still loomed, particularly when it came to Jessica. I knew I had to confront her again, to find closure and express how her betrayal had affected me. One afternoon, I decided it was time. I reached out to Jessica and asked if she would meet me at the same bar where we had our initial confrontation. I wanted to do this not just for me, but also for the sake of moving forward in my new life. When I arrived at the bar, I felt a mix of anxiety and determination. I wasn't sure how this conversation would unfold, but I knew it was necessary. Jessica arrived shortly after, her expression a mix of apprehension and confusion. "Hey," she greeted me, her voice soft. "Thanks for meeting me," I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral. We sat in silence for a moment, both of us seemingly lost in our thoughts. Finally, I broke the silence. "I wanted to talk to you about everything that happened. I think it's important for both of us to find closure." Her gaze dropped to the table. "I know I hurt you, Mike. I wish I could take it back." "I appreciate that," I said, "but I need you to understand how deeply your actions affected me. You shattered my trust, and it took me a long time to rebuild myself after that." Jessica nodded, her cheeks flushed with shame. "I was selfish. I got caught up in something exciting and didn't think about the consequences. I'm really sorry." "I know you're sorry, but it doesn't change the fact that you chose to betray me. I want to move on, and I hope you find a way to be okay, too," I stated firmly. As we continued talking, I felt a sense of release. I wasn't there to seek revenge or to tear her down. I was there to reclaim my own narrative. I learned that forgiveness didn't mean excusing her actions. It meant freeing myself from the burden of holding onto anger. At the end of our conversation, I stood up, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. "I hope you find happiness, Jessica. I truly mean that," I said, and for the first time I felt a sense of closure wash over me. Walking away from that bar, I felt lighter and more empowered than ever. I was ready to embrace my new life with Sarah, filled with hope for the future. I had learned that healing was a journey, and I was finally finding my way. The pain of betrayal would always be a part of my story, but it no longer defined me. Instead, I was becoming the person I had always wanted to be, free, strong, and open to love once more. And that felt like a victory worth celebrating. As I moved on from my confrontation with Jessica, I felt like I had finally closed a painful chapter in my life. With each passing day, I grew more confident in my decision to move forward and embrace the new path I was carving out for myself. The interactions I had with Sarah became more meaningful, and I found myself genuinely enjoying the moments we shared. With her, I felt a sense of peace that I hadn't experienced in a long time. Our relationship blossomed naturally as we explored more of each other's interests. We attended concerts, went hiking, and even tried our hand at cooking classes together. I was rediscovering the joy of companionship without the cloud of deceit that had hung over my previous relationship. One evening, as we were sitting on the couch watching a movie, I turned to Sarah and said, "You know, you've helped me more than you realize. Just being with you has made me appreciate the little things in life again." She smiled, her eyes sparkling. "I'm really glad to hear that." "Mike, you deserve to be happy. We all do." Those words resonated deeply with me. I had spent so much time feeling unworthy of happiness after everything that had happened with Jessica. But now, sitting next to Sarah, I realized that I was deserving of love, laughter, and a brighter future. In the weeks that followed, I noticed how much I was changing. I was more at ease with myself, and for the first time in a long while, I felt excited about what the future held. Sarah encouraged me to pursue my interests and passions, reminding me that this was my time to shine. One warm Saturday afternoon, we decided to check out a local art festival. As we walked through the exhibits, I found myself captivated by the creativity and expression surrounding us. I had always enjoyed art but had never fully embraced it as a hobby. Inspired by the vibrant colors and unique works, I made a decision to take up painting again, something I had loved as a child. "Why don't you sign up for a class?" Sarah suggested as we browsed through the booths. "I think you'd really enjoy it." I hesitated, for a moment feeling a flicker of self-doubt. "I haven't painted in years. What if I'm not good enough?" "Who cares?" she replied, her voice filled with enthusiasm. "It's not about being good, it's about expressing yourself and having fun. Just go for it." Her encouragement lit a fire within me. I decided to enroll in a painting class, eager to dive back into a passion I had neglected for far too long. It felt liberating to explore my creativity again, and with each brushstroke I found a sense of catharsis. As I painted, I realized that this was more than just a hobby, it was a form of therapy. I poured my emotions onto the canvas, transforming pain into beauty. Each piece I created represented a step forward in my healing journey. The colors were vibrant, reflecting the newfound hope and joy I felt within. Throughout this process, I kept in touch with Tom and my other friends, who had stood by me during my darkest days. They were thrilled to hear about my progress and my blossoming relationship with Sarah. I felt lucky to have such a solid support system. One evening, as I wrapped up a painting, I received a text from Tom. "Hey man, let's have a get-together soon. I want to see your new art." I smiled, feeling a sense of pride in what I had accomplished. "Absolutely. I'd love to show you guys." The following weekend, I hosted a small gathering at my place. I displayed my recent artworks around the living room, and as my friends arrived, I could see their eyes light up with curiosity. They applauded my efforts and offered words of encouragement, reminding me how far I had come since that painful chapter of my life. "Dude, this is amazing," Mike exclaimed, pointing to one of my pieces. "You've got real talent." I felt a surge of validation as I shared my journey with them, the transformation from heartbreak to healing. "It's funny how something as simple as painting can help you navigate your emotions," I said. "It's been a real game changer for me." As the night progressed, I felt surrounded by love and support. I realized that I had reclaimed my life and was embracing the possibilities ahead. I was no longer tethered to the past. I had learned and grown from it. At the end of the evening, as my friends began to leave, I stood in the doorway, feeling a sense of gratitude wash over me. I had weathered the storm of betrayal and emerged stronger and more resilient. I turned to Sarah, who was helping me clean up. "Thank you for being a part of this journey with me. I really appreciate everything you've done." She smiled, her eyes warm and sincere. "You've done this all yourself, Mike. I'm just here to support you as you shine." In that moment, I realized that the future held endless possibilities. I was finally free, free to love, to create, and to be the person I had always wanted to be. As I stood there, surrounded by friends and the vibrant colors of my art, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, I was ready to face them head-on with courage and an open heart. I had learned that true happiness comes from within. It was no longer about seeking validation from others, but rather about embracing my own worth and choosing to live authentically. This was my life, and I was finally ready to live it fully. The betrayal had shaped me, but it would not define me. I was ready to embrace the journey ahead, one brushstroke at a time.